The world has been pressurizing India, don't talk to Russia, don't talk to Russia. But they also know one thing, that it is only and only India that can talk to Russia. Prime Minister Modi, in an emotional message, also told Vladimir Putin that when people die, it's sad, but when children die, it just crushes you from the inside. The world's greatest democracy, the leader of the world's greatest democracy, that is India, is hugging a bloody criminal like Putin. But the fact is that what India does is strategic autonomy. So India needs to communicate to the West. First of all, it's about getting a good deal for your own people. Despite US pressure, India bought billions of dollars worth of oil from Russia. So India is going to take time, because this entire Atmanirbharta and Make in India, this entire exercise of Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's very recent to India. But if you give weapons to your allies, it basically means that those allies are strong enough to fight against China at one point in time. Jan friends, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like this video, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Till very recently, Prime Minister Modi was in Moscow. He traveled to other parts of Russia along with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and they had a lot of discussions. I mean, one of the major discussions was how to move the Indian trade with Russia from the current $65 billion to over $100 billion by 2030. Prime Minister Modi also told President Putin that this is not an era of war. This is something that he had said earlier also, and it became quite famous, quite popular. He repeated that again, and he said that you cannot find a solution to the Russia-Ukraine war in more war. It cannot be found on the battlefield. And this came at the backdrop of a missile hit in Ukraine, in which more than 37 people were killed, including 3 children. And Prime Minister Modi, in an emotional message, also told Vladimir Putin that when people die, it's sad, but when children die, it just crushes you from the inside. And this is what he said. He said that India is willing to go to any extent to ensure that there is peace between Ukraine and Russia. Now, there was a photograph of Prime Minister Modi hugging Vladimir Putin. And they share a close bond. They have met many times in the past 10 years. And they were shaking hands and hugging. And in a tweet, Zelensky said that this is very sad. And he feels extremely upset because, the world's greatest democracy, the leader of the world's greatest democracy, that is India, is hugging a bloody criminal like Putin. He did not mention Putin's name, but it was clear who was hugging whom. So he says he's a criminal. Putin is a criminal, and he's called Putin a criminal many other times in many other platforms. He has used various platforms to do personal attacks against Vladimir Putin. Now, a lot of things were discussed, including the Ukraine-Russia war, including trade, etc., and so many other things that India wants to do with Russia, including energy, including a corridor for getting oil from Russia to India, etc. But one of the things that is not being discussed is something that I am going to discuss with you today, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, Russia has offered cooperation in building small tropical nuclear power stations to India with the possibility of their deep localization, which means deep localization as in indigenization of various parts of those nuclear reactors, including transfer of the construction part to New Delhi. Now, this was said by Director General of Rosatom, State Atomic Energy Corporation of Russia. Alexei Likhashev is his name. So what Alexei Likhashev actually meant was that this nuclear reactor, which India and Russia are partnering for, they can make a lot of it in India. Obviously, it has to be based in India, but a lot of parts can be made in India, and they will do the technology transfer also. Now, this came during Prime Minister Modi's visit to the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit with President Putin in Russia on July 8th and 9th. Obviously, as I told you, Prime Minister Modi is currently in Austria. Alexei Likhashev also conducted a tour for Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Atom Pavilion at VDNKH. VDNKH is an educational complex featuring an exhibition on the evolution of nuclear energy, its latest advancement and the technologies for harnessing atomic energy. It has 7 floors and 3 underground levels. So this is an entire structure that is actually, you can call it a research and a development center. You can call it a educational center, which teaches Russians and which discusses amongst Russians how to harness atomic energy. Russia and India are collaborating on building 6 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactors in Kudankulam. Power units 1 and 2 of the Kudankulam nuclear power plant NPP in Tamil Nadu are being constructed with Russia's help since 1998, and they have already been commissioned. It is an intergovernmental agreement, IGA. They call it an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement on the project, which was signed on 20th November 1988 by then Prime Minister of India, Rajiv Gandhi, and the Soviet head of state, Mikhail Gorbachev, at that point in time, for the construction of 2 nuclear reactors. This project remained in limbo for a decade due to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In the early 90s, the Soviet Union broke apart and 15 new countries were created, amongst them Russia. Ukraine was also part of the Soviet Union, for those of you who did not know. There were also objections from the United States on the grounds that the agreement did not meet the 1992 terms of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. The construction of power units number 3, number 4, number 5 and number 6 is currently underway. The plan is to complete the construction fully by 2027. Going back to December 2021, New Delhi also promised to provide an area for construction of the second Russia-designed NPP. Now, this is as per the state-run news agency TASS. Vladimir Putin personally driving Indian Prime Minister Modi. You've all seen that image. It's a EV and Vladimir Putin was driving Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the world said, this is actually, shows the closeness between India and Russia. So, it's a mini electric car at his residence. And, it shows the strengthening bond between the two nations. Now, what does PM Modi's Russia visit amid Russia-Ukraine war indicate? It is a clear sign that the West's sanctions and attempts to isolate Putin over this war are having limited effect, and India is in no mood to aggravate its relations with Russia despite Western pressure. Prime Minister Modi, who leads the world's biggest democracy, has propped Putin up by making India one of a few loyal customers of Russian oil and gas throughout the 2-year war in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the kind of pressure India was under. It happened even when there was sanctions on Iran. India took oil from Iran. This is not so much about, India following non-alignment. Though it is. That is not untrue. But the fact is that what India does is strategic autonomy. So India needs to communicate to the West. First of all, it's about getting a good deal for your own people, right? You must get a good deal for your own people, irrespective of what the West says. I mean, look at our purchasing power parity. Right? It's very, very less compared to the Americans. Even the Chinese, even the Europeans, is very less. So our government needs to get the best deal possible for our people. If you don't get the best deal possible for our people, there'll be massive inflation in India, and the poor will not be able to tolerate it. And this is exactly what India did. Despite US pressure, India bought billions of dollars worth of oil from Russia. They just kept on buying oil after oil after oil. And there was a time when India was the top exporter of oil to Europe. I discussed this in a video a few months ago where, India had been buying Russian crude, which was banned, by the way, so they refined it in India. The chemical composition of the oil changed. It was no longer the banned Russian oil. This new oil, quote unquote, this new kind of oil was sold by India to Europe. And the US and everybody else could not say anything simply because it was not the same Russian oil. The chemical composition of the oil had changed, and therefore India became the top supplier of fuel to the European Union. And the Saudis were surprised, and the Americans were surprised because, well, India doesn't have oil. How can it become the top supplier? So that is all a bit of recent history, ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Alan Ahn, Deputy Director for the Nuclear Climate and Energy Program with Third Way, a Washington, D.C.-based climate and energy research organization, has said that Russia leads the world in the number of nuclear plant construction projects in other countries, and the Russian government has been very aggressive in engaging international partners on civil nuclear cooperation. This basically means, ladies and gentlemen, that the dominance in nuclear power is helping Putin retain his position on the world stage, even as the US and Europe shun him over the war, and PM Modi is clearly sticking with India's tradition of non-aligned foreign policy that allows it to trade with Russia while remaining a friend of the West. Russia and India might not be focusing only on oil and gas trade, as Russian and Indian delegates also discussed taking advantages of the Northern Sea route, a shipping passage that is becoming more and more feasible because of the Arctic ice melt. It's a quicker way to get from Western Russia to India than going the other way around, and the whole stretch is projected to be ice-free by 2030. 50. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the thing. You see, the world has been pressurizing India, don't talk to Russia, don't talk to Russia. But they also know one thing, that it is only and only India that can talk to Russia. Because Russia, you see, India is the non-interested party in the sense that India is the neutral party, if I may put it that way. India is the neutral party here. I mean, who will talk to Russia if not India? The Americans can't talk, NATO cannot talk, Africa cannot talk, China cannot. China can talk, but then China is an interested party. India has no stakes in this entire war in the sense that, yes, our supply chains are affected. No doubt they are. Any war in the world, somebody's supply chains will be impacted. But the fact of the matter is that, India says that we are neither supporting Ukraine nor Russia. We want peace. This is why Prime Minister Modi again and again, he said that a year back. He said this again in front of Vladimir Putin, and then he said it again in Austria, where he is currently. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for the question and answers. We have Naveen Ruhil, who says, is fascism good for Bharat to tackle the problem of Deshdrohi, which means traitor? What he means to say is, should there be fascism in India to tackle the problem of Deshdrohi? My friend, if you have fascism in India, then you can say goodbye to everything that you hold dear and sacred. Fascism is a illness of the blood. It is a sickness of the mind. Right? Deshdrohis you can deal with. Traitors you can deal with. Fascism, it will just make everything so hollow. Hitler was a fascist. Hitler was a fascist. Mussolini was a fascist. And Hitler was perhaps the most evil man ever born on this earth. He was absolutely crazy. Right? So, no, you don't want to engage with fascists. You don't even want to know what a fascist is. Just keep away. It's just too evil. Now, Partha says, Namaste Gaurav ji, Namaste Partha ji. My question is that some in India question why we are trying to manufacture big things if we cannot even make small things like routers, peripherals, etc. Do you think today there is more trust in Bharat to manufacture the big stuff, for which trust is not adequate enough in China? If not in China, where do you see the manufacturing of the small to middle equipment going? Global South? Okay, so I'd like to tell you one thing here. It is not that India cannot manufacture. India has started to manufacture. We never paid attention to this in the past. And you must give India time. We are extremely impatient. We are the kind of people who want to see results the next day. It doesn't happen like that. American manufacturing has been going on for over a century. Japanese manufacturing has been there over a century. Just to give you a small example, I think I've said it before in some video. You're aware of this company that manufactures vehicles and electronics from Japan called Mitsubishi. You're all aware of Mitsubishi, right? During the Second World War, Mitsubishi was not making washing machines. They were making fighter jets. They made an iconic fighter plane called Zero, which was used by the kamikazes to bomb the American Navy in the Pacific and other places here. So all these countries have been manufacturing for centuries, big and small. So India is going to take time, because this entire Atmanirbharta and Make in India, this entire exercise of Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's very recent to India. It's just 5, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. You need to give India time. It should have started 60, 70 years back. It did not. It did not. Now it's starting in earnest. You'll have to wait to see it grow. Hari Konat says, hi Major, I have a question. You say that India should give weapons, Tejas, Prachand, etc. to Philippines and other countries, but India itself is having a shortage of these weapons. So how should India manage selling weapons to other countries and manage its own lack of sufficient weapons? A very good question. Now let me tell you. When I say give weapons to these countries, all these are countries which have a solid dispute with China. And China is trying to fight these countries, bully these countries. Why do we need weapons? We need weapons to majorly contain China, and to some small extent Pakistan, but Pakistan is a teeny-weeny cog in the wheel. It's mostly China that we need to contain, right? So, if you give it to an ally, if you give weapons to an ally, of course you need to ramp up your own production. There is no doubting that. You need to ramp up your own production. But if you give weapons to your allies, it basically means that those allies are strong enough to fight against China at one point in time. But you're saying that we ourselves lack those weapons right now because manufacturing is slow. I agree with you. We must hasten stuff up. We must make it faster and faster. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That is all that I have for you today. If you like this video, press the like button, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata ki Jai.